general public does not know this. Business development people do not know this, that grad school programs do not teach therapists how to treat trauma.
Or addiction.
Or addiction.
So where is anybody new going to learn it? Don't get me started this early.
I know.
The Deepwater's, the training is not just for our facilitators. It's a training to teach people how to use psychodrama and gestalt that people can learn without spending 10 years studying that stuff.
Then that the reason that for some of us, we cannot remember much of our childhood.
That's the only reason we're here. Thank God for denial.
Yeah, I had some early childhood experiences. Was my first visceral experience of shame, feeling like something in me had died, but also knowing very clearly, I cannot talk about this. Parents doing the best they could, that kind of stuff that happens to us when we're kids, it has an impact on us.
It's such a good message, Marie. Yeah, it's not about blaming anyone. It's simply about looking at what happened. Hey there, and welcome to the Recovery Crew. I'm Dr. Bob Beare, and this is Deepwater's Recovery. Our guest today is Marie Krebs, and she's a wise person who's been around the healing world for a while, and we're going to have some really good discussions about how the healing process works. So Deepwater's Recovery is a variety of things, but mostly we're healing trauma and helping people launch into lives of meaning. We have a facilitator's training, and that is an ongoing certification process for anyone who wants to learn this particular kind of trauma resolution work. The Deepwater's Intensive is the centerpiece. That's for anybody that's ready to do the work. So glad you're here. Enjoy the show. Okay, here we are. I am looking at Camille Reid and Marie Krebs. We got Marie Krebs. We've been wrestling her toward this podcast for a while. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Camille is the programs coordinator at Deepwater's, and Marie is our special guest who I'm not, in a moment, I'll read some of the list of all the stuff that she's done. We won't get it, all of it, because it won't fit on the podcast, but so glad you're here, Marie.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Yeah. And Camille, if you would you just go over some of the events that are happening here at Deepwater's, let people know what's up?
Yes, absolutely. Quick Deepwater's rundown. Deepwater's Recovery is an advanced recovery and healing experience for men and women. We've got the Deepwater's Intensive, or DWI, which is a 3-day transformational trauma resolution experience that uses psychodrama, bioenergetics, and rituals of empowerment. Our upcoming training to be a facilitator of the DWI is on March 26th and 27th in Austin. And it is an opportunity for anyone who works with others to do their own inner work and learn some action tools that they can take out and use in groups. If you'd like to bring the sustainable trauma resolution into the curriculum of your treatment facility, the Deepwater's programming will be a good fit. We've also got an outpatient program where you can work with Dr. Beare and his colleagues in groups, individuals, couples, and family sessions. And then I'll give our contact info at the end here, but we do our podcasts every Wednesday, and then blogs come out on Friday. And then Dr. Bob also has a TikTok where he is the recovery and trauma guy, if you need a little midday laugh.
All right. Thank you, Camille.
Yeah.
At Deepwater's Intensive, we do it every we do it every few months, but the training is not just for our facilitators. It's a training to teach people how to use. It's not rocket science, right, Marie? I mean, there's some things in psychodrama and gestalt that people can learn without spending 10 years studying that stuff. And that's kind of what I'm trying to hand over, because Marie and I were just talking about there isn't enough training for our colleagues to learn how to help heal trauma, and we all have it. Okay, don't get me started this early. All right, here we go. I want to introduce to you my friend and the friend of anybody that's in recovery and doing healing work that's been around this work for any period of time, Marie Krebs. She is a therapist, coach, interventionist, treatment consultant, lots of experience in organizational leadership and ethics, nonprofit management, business consulting, and she's a longtime therapist focusing on addictions and substance use disorders, process addictions, intimacy, all the things that people are afraid of actually digging. Marie has gone for because she knows that that's where the deep healing really is. And an expert on all psychiatric disorders. Here's just a little list of the licenses. Licensed special counselor supervisor, licensed chemical dependency counselor in Texas, certified clinical partner. What is it? Oh, partner specialist. That's this actually faded on the sheet that I'm a certified sexual recovery therapist, master addiction counselor, national certified addiction counselor too, Jerry certified facilitator, which you can say more about that. She's a brain spot practitioner, brain spotting, telemental health certified. She's an interventionist. All right, I'm going to stop there because there's only, we're only going to do this for a certain period of time. But some of it is about getting a bunch of letters on. It used to be when we were younger and trying to pull that off, but now it's about having breadth, right? And having those also has people, the younger folks that need to learn that stuff, they know who to come to. So there's many pieces to that. But anyway, Marie, I'm so glad you're here. We all want to hear some of the story, some of your personal story, and how it sort of launched you into this breadth of healing work that you've been doing for quite a while. All right, welcome.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me. And Camille, again, it's nice to meet you. And I just love it when, I get introduced to young people that are kind of coming up and they're excited about this work. And it does inspire me. It does. So, it's interesting. I told my story at in Al-Anon. Taos had a, statewide Rocky Mountain annual meeting several years ago. And it was interesting because, it was telling my story in a community of people who pretty much didn't know me, right? And I think it's funny because a lot of people, they think that they know me, but they really, people don't really know me very well. They don't know how I landed, where and why I even got into this work. And so I think as far as telling my story, and I'm going to ask Camille, if you would, give me like a little hand sim, if I need like 5 minutes or something like that, because, sometimes I get into it and I'm telling the story and I need to wrap it up, but I'm going to try to monitor this myself. So what I would say is, and I think it's important because my story is, where it begins. And without getting into any, details about, my family, not like granular details, suffice to say that I was raised in I wouldn't say it was an alcoholic home, but I had an older sister who was profoundly disabled. And as a result, and for anyone who's an adult child of an alcoholic, it doesn't have to be an adult child of an alcoholic. It can be someone in the house that has a mental illness, a parent with depression, it could be taking care of an invalid grandparent. You have the same kind of experiences, if you will, where the primary caregivers are not available for the kiddos. So, I grew up with that. And again, she's my sister. I love her. She's still here on this earth and all, but, she was, when I was about 5, she was sent away to the state school, and back when you could send kids away to do a state school. But for the first 5 years of my life, I experienced a lot of abuse, a lot of physical abuse, hair pulling, ripping out of my head, biting, hitting, this kind of thing. And, again, my parents were doing the best they could, but, my mother would separate us. And I, as a little kid, I was like, wait, I just got pummeled. I got this, and I'm being punished. I'm being sent to my room. So that kind of, so there's that element. there's the, which then kind of begets that whole thing. If you think about a kiddo growing up in this kind of an environment and trying to make sense of this, right? Yeah. Trying to make sense of that which we cannot make sense of, right? Yeah. So, there was this piece of it. There was, my dad traveled all, during the week. And so my mother essentially was a stay-at-home mom, lots of girls, Roman Catholic, mass every Sunday, parochial schools, very, very strict, tons, image management, what people thought of us. And you can imagine, this disconnect. What are people going to think about our family? We have our first child is a disabled child. Yeah. Right. So you can imagine some of this, and I'm saying all this to kind of, tee up, if you will, what it's like to grow up in a house like that. Yeah. And where things don't really make sense and you don't feel like you belong. And then, when she was sent away, when my sister was sent away, in that moment, I became essentially the oldest of the kids, right? And so I have 3 younger sisters. There's 5 girls in the family in total. And when she was sent away, very painful decision for any parent, obviously, there was never any discussion about it, right? Yeah. So, my takeaway message from that is, if you're bad, you will be sent away, and we don't talk about it, right? Yeah. So feeling the freedom of, as a child, like if something were to happen, something bad were to happen to you, it's like, yikes, that could be the thing I could be sent away from, again, just all this kind of, crazy kind of stuff.
Isn't it right, Marie, that I love the way you're pointing at this, that the adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families doesn't always mean it's like alcohol or something that an adult was doing intentionally.
Right.
It's circumstances sometimes.
Exactly.
For a kid, it doesn't matter. When there's disruption, it goes in the body and it stays there, and we make up stuff and feel shame, right?
Right. And, another thing too, that I've come to realize, because for myself personally, I had a very difficult time, when I got older and, got into therapy and trying to like sort this out. And people were like, well, tell me about your childhood. I'm being like, I can tell you it's like a, kind of like a passive observer, but, like in terms of like, like rooted memories and stuff. Mm-hmm. And what I've realized, and we know this with, when we're working with people with, whether it's, DID or some, serious mental illness issues, that disassociation is a big part of what they do. It's a coping strategy. And so, doesn't it make sense then that the reason that for some of us, we cannot remember much of our childhood?
Our system is brilliant. Our system is brilliant.
Absolutely.
That's the only reason we're here, because of, thank God for denial.
Yeah. Well, and for that ability to disassociate. Right. Because it is that it's a mechanism that kind of clicks on. It's it's part of the human condition, and it does it to kind of, it helps to soothe us. It kind of allows us to kind of transport ourselves away from all of this, and so whether you grow up in a, and like you said, whether alcoholic home or other kind of a dysfunctional family. And so, I had some of that on board too. So getting back, I want to jump back though to the, being bad. If you're bad, that message, being bad, you're going to get sent away. Yeah. And so, I had some early childhood experiences of, things that happened to me that I, kind of wrong place, wrong time, like walking down. And I remember a man exposed himself to me, grown man. It was just, and I was like probably 7 or 8. That was my first visceral experience of shame and terror, because if I go home and tell my parents, because I already knew from a couple years earlier, boy, if you're bad or you do something, you're going to be sent away. Mm-hmm. And so shove this down, and had another experience when I was about 12. And again, because of the, lack of being able to be really oriented to the, time and place, but I was about 12, 13 years old, and I was raped by an older boy, like a college age boy who'd come back from the weekend. Right. And again, remember walking away from that experience, and again, feeling like something in me had died that day, but also knowing very clearly, I cannot talk about this.
That's right.
We got the image management. It would be my fault. You know, there would be, and I was just like, you can do this. You'll figure it out. You'll figure, you know, which is what we tell ourselves, right? We'll figure it out, figure it out. So anyhow, you know, kind of orienting you guys to the fact that, you know, early childhood trauma, and again, parents doing the best they could. I mean, both my parents are deceased. I don't, you know, I know that they did the best that they could with the resources that they had. But I also know that, you know, that kind of stuff that happens to us when we're kids, it has an impact on us.
It's such a good message. It's such a good message, Marie. Yes, we're all from good families. Actually, there was goodness in most everybody's family. And
Absolutely.
That's one of the knee-jerk things folks say to protect them. I'm from a good family. I don't have any trauma. But what a good message that is, that, yeah, it's not about blaming anyone. It's simply about looking at what happened.
At what happened, exactly. And being able to, you know, also honor the fact that, knowing my parents' background, you know, as you get older and you start learning more about your parents and how they came up and how, you know, I remember after my mom passed and, you know, kind of going through some things, we were all like, wait, what? Yeah, seeing some stuff. It was like, wow, it's like this woman I mean, like I felt like I knew her pretty well, but then it, you know, like it opens up even more, which then again creates more empathy and understanding for, you know, what they were doing the best that they could, and how, you know, and again, being older, like you, Dr. Bob, you know, things were very different back in the 50s and the 60s, you know, when it came to raising children, and, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child is kind of the house I grew up in. So there was a lot of that too. And again, so a lot of these kinds of messages, and, you know, all overlaid with this perfect, got to be perfect, that image management, and the secret keeping. You know, what happens in this house stays in this house.
That's right.
Right?
Shame, our friend Brene Brown, I don't know if I have the quote right, but shame can't survive language, or it's something like that. Where
being in the light, it cannot survive when it's exposed.
That's right.
That's exactly right. And so, you know, not only having my own personal shame, but carrying the shame of the family for various things, right? Mm-hmm. So anyhow, that kind of sets me up as this, you know, adolescent girl who's had all of this trauma, and, you know, meeting different people, being exposed to different people, having different experiences, you know, experimenting with, you know, some drugs. But I really drugs were really not my thing. They really weren't. I mean, yeah, did try things? Yeah, but it really wasn't my thing. And I was more the, you know, let's go to class, let's get to school. Because for me, I saw getting an education and getting out and graduating as getting through this whole, you know, high school experience as quickly as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And which I did. And so anyhow, then, you know, off to college, and my undergraduate was in English and psychology. And I remember I was getting close to graduation, and my mother said, well, what would you like? You know, what size ring do you have so I can get you a graduation gift? Again, remember the image thing. I was like, no, I don't want any jewelry. Actually, you know, if you want to give me a little help going to grad school, you know, I'd like to become a psychologist. I'd like to, you know. And she's like, no, what size ring do you wear? Because we're not, you know, we're not doing that. And I was like, okay, well, and I say that to say that it wasn't supposed to happen at that time, but being in this profession, being in a helping profession, it was something I knew pretty much my whole life, that really? This is what wow. Very much so. And that's another thing too, I want to bring up, that, you know, I think I knew when I was a young girl that I wanted to be in the helping professions. Growing up in a parochial school system, you know, I used to think, and I tell people this, I wanted to be a nun. I really did. I thought they were just so, you know, I was exposed to some really sick, toxic, unhealthy ones, but then I also met some really sweet.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see Sister Marie. Are you kidding? Oh yeah. And
I'll
also it sort of ties into the bad girl, don't be bad, right? Is there any of that?
Right. Well, and thinking about it from this perspective, when I changed my mind from being a nun was after I had been raped. I thought, I can't do this now. There's no way I could do this now, right? As a young girl. So, but still that seed, if you will, of that knowing, like in my bones at the cellular level, that being in some kind of a helping profession. So fast forward, get through college, graduate, come back home, and that's where I met my who would become my husband. I think it's important to know about him. We've been divorced for over 20 years. I have a lot of empathy and compassion for the man. He's still actively, in his addiction. I think part of the story that people are like, you what? When I met him, he was one of the few men I had ever met that had such a passion for life and for living. I had never met anyone at that point in my life that had such a passion for living. And part of that was because he was a double amputee. He had survived a motorcycle accident years earlier in South Florida. And as a result of this, he was in a head-on collision. He was on a motorcycle, was hit by another motorcycle. He was thrown the distance of a football field. He landed on his left side. And as a result, thank God he had his helmet on, because if he hadn't had his helmet on, he would not be here. But he lost his left arm and his left leg as a result of this accident. And I met him after his accident, because a lot of people are like, wait, what? Like, who does that? But again, I'm more of a, who are you in here? I've always been that. Who are you on the inside? That's what's attractive to me, right? And anyhow, so, kind of fast forward, and I don't want to get into all of his stuff, but it was a big part of the ending of our marriage, and pretty much the ending of our marriage was in a direct correlation to his addiction, but not only his addiction, but my inability to manage this image, clean up after him, try to control him, his drinking, his drugging, and all the while, guised in this, trying to protect my children from this, right? Yep. And if you've ever met any people who've been married to active alcoholics for a long time, they kind of have this thing with control.
Yeah, and there's another thing. As a person who's put together family programs, as I have, you and I both know that the first 2 or 3 days of those programs are involved in helping the family see that their addiction is just as severe. It may not look as bad, because we're taking care, as Al-Anons, we're taking care of the addict in so many ways. It doesn't look as bad, but there's a lot of denial about that disease of fixing and controlling, right?
Right, I agree. Where my story differs from that piece, yes, on the controlling part, but where my story differs a bit is because part of what happened to me is I completely lost myself.
Yeah.
I was so excited when we first got married. We moved to Austin. I was here back in the, early 80s. I was so excited. It was like, oh, I'm going to go back to grad school. Now I can go become a psychologist. Oh, no, you're not going to grad school. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Well, I think I'm going to go get a job. No, you're not going to do. Oh, okay. And this people pleasing, completely losing myself in this relationship, so that by the time 3 kids later, by the time I'm, we're getting to the end of this relationship, this marriage, and his drinking's really pretty much off the chain. I cannot control any of this. And I make the decision. I'm not going to get into the details of it. I think if people look at some of my certifications, they may have an understanding of why I did some of those things, okay, without having to go into any kind of story, right?
Yeah.
But when it was all kind of winding down, and I was like, like this kind of puddle, really kind of a puddle of a human being, because I no longer knew who I was, because my whole identity was wrapped up in being a wife and being a mother. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm a single mom and now responsible for raising 3 kids.
Yeah.
Which I have no regrets about that. I have 3 amazing, extraordinary kids. Just love them to pieces. But it was like November of 2000 is when I filed for divorce. And I was sitting in my first Al-Anon meeting before the end of the month. It was like right after Thanksgiving back in 2000. And all I can tell you about those days, I remember them vividly. I had nothing but, every single cell in my body was firing fear and sadness. I just cried all the time. And absolutely terrified because there was nothing. It's like everything about me that in terms of myself, who I was, my identity, everything had just been like obliterated.
Yeah.
And this is how Al-Anon helped me, because Al-Anon helped me start to see the process of unwinding myself and losing myself. But it also helped me learn how to reclaim myself. Yeah.
So just for people listening, Marie, anybody that just happens to stumble into this podcast and doesn't know what Al-Anon is a program, a 12-step program, a spiritual program for folks that have people in their life that are dysfunctional, usually addiction, usually it's alcohol. But like we were just talking about, there's many different forms of addiction. One of them is addiction to other people where we completely lose ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? And Al-Anon helps people get themselves. It doesn't matter what the disease is, the result's the same. Camille, did you cry for the first year of your recovery too? I did. I'm still crying 30 years later.
Yeah. I was emotional 24/7. It wasn't, and then, like I'm in recovery from other things too. Like I'm a severe, codependent and the sex and love addiction side. So yes, the drugs and alcohol are removed, but then all these other things come up. And so then after a year of abstinence from substances, I have all these new problems coming up. And now I have to learn, how to live that part of my life and start becoming a human being.
Yeah. Well, and for me, I look at it as really reclaiming ourselves, really kind of reclaiming that inner child that, for that precious child that came into this world and all we were, born to become and manifest in the world. It is a reclamation process. And the thing about suffering is it is God's way of helping us grow.
Yeah.
But I want to tell you, part of, the human condition, we do not want to suffer. We want to be happy. We want to, and people don't want to suffer. People don't want to,
and it's not really that advised to go suffer on your own anyway. It's kind of that's what the beauty of 12-step recovery is. Yes, suffer, but let's do it together.
Yeah.
Let's do it together.
Let's do it together and let's help each other heal. Yeah. And we know that through, as you know, Bob, you run groups and that's how we heal and telling our story and being able to tell our story and say it in a way that there isn't that the sting is gone. So I'm going to kind of segue here if I can, because this will take me back. I mentioned this before, that I told my story years ago at the Rocky Mountain, national meeting that they had up there in Taos. And there was a particular part that I was talking about, and I had a colleague who was with me in the audience. And afterwards, she said, "Would you like me to do some brain spotting with you on that little incident that you had there where you tended, where you got a little reclimped, Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Absolutely. I'm all about this brain spotting stuff." And so anyhow, we had a session with her that afternoon, and it is amazing to me how, and I tell people all the time, and I know you do too, that, when it comes to trauma gets stored in the body at the cellular level. If we do not treat this trauma that's in our system that still has a charge, because that's what that charge is. So all of those tears in the very beginning, and, like you said, Camille, he cried for a year, going into me, just crying. It's literally, you're processing this trauma through your system. right? That's all you're doing. You're processing trauma, getting it out of your system. But there's other stuff that gets kind of packed in there too, older stuff that gets packed in there where, you know, sometimes on our own, we can't get it out by ourselves, right? You're not going to necessarily, you know, sitting in a 12-step meeting, be able to get through all the trauma, which is why working with people who are trained to treat trauma, trained to treat somatically, you know, research bears out 30% of trauma can be alleviated, if you will, healed with talk therapy, but only 30%. So you got another 70% still in your system, right? So it's going to take a skilled, trained professional to help you process that. So whether it's EMDR, brain spotting, SE, Gestalt, you know, various experiential activities, those can really, where you're using your body and you're moving and you're having all of this. So anyhow, you know, what I would say is, that's kind of.
You can't just say brain spotting. And then
I'm going to tell them.
Hell it is.
I'll tell you what it is. And let me back up by saying, so, you know, when I went to grad school to become a therapist years later, and let me back up because this is important too. Right after my divorce, or no, actually correction, right after I filed for divorce, guess what I finally did? I went back to grad school.
Right.
Of course I did.
Yeah.
First thing, signed up for grad school.
Yeah.
And I went in wanting to be a counselor, and it was at St. Edward's, and I got talked out of becoming a counselor. Again, still in that, I hadn't grown up enough. I hadn't gotten back to and I got talked into, it was a brand new program over there at St. Edward's, the Organizational Leadership and Ethics. It's a master's in organizational leadership. Absolutely fabulous program. I was in the first cohort that went through. And you know what people are like, oh, she's got a master's in organizational leadership and ethics. And I'm like, let me tell you, you know, they kind of, I hate to say they sold us a bill of goods, but it really, you know, it's a thing to kind of talk about, like you've got a master's in ethics at a cocktail party. But, you know, when these programs were being developed, it was around that whole time of that Enron scandal. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we were thinking that we would be hired as ethics officers and we'd be able to go into companies. And I thought, well, it's still kind of a helping profession, not one-on-one, but more of a global systemic, being able to make some systemic change organizationally in places. But then, you know, Sarbanes-Oxley came down as a result of the Enron scandal. And yeah, that I wasn't going to push papers in an HR office. I didn't want to do that. So it was years later after that, that I finally went back and became a counselor. And, but while I was in grad school, one of the things that became abundantly clear to me is they do not train you how to treat addictions. And they absolutely, definitely do not train you to how to treat trauma. That's just, you know, you get a generalist, I would call it, you know, like a general practitioner type of degree if you are going to a traditional counseling program. Now, there's some, I would say that, you know, Pacifica, and there's certain schools around the country that very much so, but
PIIS, Naropa.
Naropa, yeah. Those
even
schools,
Northwestern, you know, Northwestern has an experiential master's program.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I've known a couple of people that have gone up there too.
There's a couple, but for the other 99%, there is nobody. And here's the reason: because the people that are teaching have not done any as much. They're academics. They haven't done their own work. That's the only way to train how to do trauma is to do my own trauma. That's why a lot of times we have to think about it more in a community-based, doing my own work in the same way that we think about recovery. Because the only person that's going to be of any benefit teaching somebody to heal trauma is somebody that's done some of their own healing, right?
And not only some, but continues to do their own work.
That's right.
Because I mean,
let me do it once. Let me go to one therapy session, cry about my child, and then I'm a trauma expert. No, it doesn't quite work like that.
Yeah, doesn't work like that. And so anyhow, that I knew that though. I mean, I knew that when I was in the program that and I came out of that going, well, you know, it's not bad. I mean, it's a master's in counseling. It was a great, it was a great program for what it was. And I think you're right, Bob, that, you know, you've got academics that are teaching in there, but the other piece of it too, and we got to look at it, and again, so my head goes to the systemic in this country, CACREP certified schools across the country. You know, I mean, they still teach stuff in grad school programs that are, I mean, oh my God, so archaic that we would never even see in our practice. And yet, because Kate Grip says you have to do this, that, you know, you do. So I think it's there's more than just not having enough instructors, but it's also just, you know, what do we say is important, right? In terms of how we equip people in the field. So that's what led me in the beginning to doing all the different certifications that I have. And I remember there's a fella, I don't know if he'll listen to this or if you've talked to him, Gary Kaufman. I think most of the people in this recovery community certainly have heard of Gary Kaufman, who's rather notorious. I'll tell him I talked about him on this. He'll like that.
We'll get him on here. He'll be on here.
Yeah, you get him on here. He is a nuts story. I mean, he's a nut. He's a good man though too. He anyhow, he years ago he gave me a certificate for having more certificates than and I was certified for having more certificates than anybody else in certificate, blah blah blah. And people have joked about that with me, and it really wasn't about the ABCs after my name. It was more about, and again, and maybe this explains why, because of this, you know, I do have a passion for doing the right thing.
Yeah. Here we go. Here we go. Now we're going to make the transition.
Now we're going to segue into doing the right thing and not practicing out of your scope of training.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, you know, just let me, before you launch on that, which I think this is great. You know, we all, you know, the birthing of, you know, ethics is really fair around fairness, isn't it? It's fair, and nobody's ever going to get perfectly fair, but I'm very righteous about it too. You and I write some of the same stuff, but I'm also aware that there was unfair stuff that we became very familiar with when we were vulnerable, and we've done some healing around it. And I think I'm like you, kind of motivated to create a world where there's just a little bit more space for people to be real with each other.
Yeah.
And not be run by other people's unresolved trauma. All right. So I just wanted to get that in there. But why don't you, so ethics, that's throughout all of your stuff. And you know, sometimes ethics is what you can call it ethics, but it's really just what people want you to do. But I think in my experience with you, Marie Krebs, it's about being good. It's being a kind, quality, good person. You can call it ethics if you want, but there's some things that we agree on as mature, kind human beings, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, and I know you brought that into the industry, and I want to hear about that.
Well, so, you know, case in point, I had a gal who's, she's in her internship now in a program, and she was reaching out to me to, you know, discuss with me about the possibility of, you know, being her supervisor, you know, as she, you know, after she gets a provisional license.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really appreciate, smart gal, you know, and I appreciated, you know, one of her first questions to me was, why did you want to become a supervisor?
Nice.
Now, that's a good question. Because, you know, you and I probably both know a number of people who that's how they pretty much build a private practice, man. They want to have a clinic. They want to run a bunch of interns through there, and they want to, you know, and again, I'm not against people making money. I mean, don't hear me out. I'm not against people making money, but I am concerned about people who aren't doing things, you know, and maybe for, you know, or they're doing things for other reasons. Right.
How did you answer that internship?
So I answered her. I said, well, there were two reasons. I said, number one, I wanted to become a supervisor because, like what you have just said, those of us who have additional training, additional experience, understand the depth and breadth of being a really good, solid clinician that understands the, you know, the scope of our practice and how we can assist somebody. I wanted to be able to kind of pass that on. I want to be able to share some knowledge, right? And you know, and part of that, a big part of that is, you know, me modeling myself with others, how I do things. I get a lot of, as I know you do, I get a lot of really tough cases, you know, a really complex. And you know, I'm honored that people think I, you know, am, got a little bit of sense about how to figure it out. But one of the things that I also know about myself, and I'm very open about, is if I don't know something, man, I'm calling people that I know are experts in the field, and they're not just in my neighborhood. These are people across the country.
Yeah.
I mean, I've consulted with people in Australia on things before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason is because, when we are dealing with, really complex systems as individuals, right? It's not just one thing that's gonna, we're not gonna, if we are, gonna be a Rogerian therapist, or, you've got to come up with your theoretical orientation.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think is an important thing, right? You got to be able to speak about what you talk about. Of course, I'll do a little segue here and say that when I was in grad school, they didn't teach my theoretical orientation, which is transpersonal.
Uh-huh.
And so I had to go outside of SMU. And fortunately, at the time, University of North Texas had a doctor up there who was teaching the theory courses for transpersonal counseling. So I was able to get my training in transpersonal counseling, which is what I really wanted, because that's what I wanted to do. And then the cool thing was I get to come back and defend my theoretical orientation to professors that didn't have a clue what I was talking about. That was a lot of fun.
Well,
but I did it. I was
suppose-
able to do it. So
Believe me, I can relate. I suppose I'm a Jungian oriented therapist.
you are, yeah.
You got to have to say, so, okay, I'll be Jungian today. I'll say
Yeah.
that tomorrow. Talk to me tomorrow, and then we'll
Right.
Jung is talked about in graduate school for about 3 minutes, and then everybody moves on to Freud and behaviorists, and because it's for the same reason, Marie. It's to be to teach transpersonal psychology, you have to be doing your own work.
You have to be, and which is why I gravitated towards it, right? And it's not going to be like the run of the mill. It's not going to be the kind of thing that your average therapist is going to, you probably even have an interest in,
Yeah.
I mean, prior to grad school, I was in a spiritual direction, 3-year spiritual direction program. And so I was getting trained in, a multitude of things in that arena as well. And, but so that was the one reason I said becoming a counselor supervisor was for me to be able to give back. I said, but the other part was because it's really important for me to help to clean up our field.
Exactly. If we're going to we can do it two ways, right, Marie? Just bitch and moan and grind away at
Exactly. Yep.
Or we can get into action and do some training around the stuff we believe in. And that's kind of why I did the supervisor thing. It's like, all right, wait a minute. I'm not going to be a victim of this thing.
Right. Well, and I think I was having, and I still do, I have a lot of people who come in, land in front of me that have experienced a lot of treatment trauma. And I got to tell you, sometimes I'm not, real good about, you're supposed to have this, they teach you in grad school that, like no affect, but that, that Rogerian, but some stuff comes out of our clients' mouths about things that happened to them at the hands of a therapist. And I am just like, and of course, because I'm like, that's not right. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Oh my, I'm so sorry. I mean, I've walked clients through filing, reports against clinicians in the state for some of their behavior. Yeah. And part of that is because people who are practicing out of the scope of their training, they fancy themselves like, oh, they got it all going on and I got this and I've got it figured out. But the truth of the matter is they really don't. And they do a lot of harm to people. And so for me, that was another reason to become a supervisor. Now, the interesting thing is I don't have any supervisees right now. I do more consultation work with, groups of kind of up and coming therapists that are, getting certified in different things. And really that's kind of where and why I keep it now. But I also, my hope is to do more trainings, kind of like what you're talking about, do more trainings and help people really have that experience. Because again, you cannot, I've said this more times than I can remember. You've got a client sitting across from you and they're telling you about their trauma. They're telling you about whatever that they're experiencing. And as a clinician, if you have not gone to the depth or even deeper than your client will know it. And they're going to hold back.
Yeah.
They will know it and they will hold back.
No, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world, Marie. But if I take that and I try to make up a bunch of shit and try to do it in some superficial intellectual place, then I can do some damage.
That's exactly right.
I haven't done every piece of work that all of my clients have done. Sometimes I can hold space for something. It's not an absolute rule, right? But for the most part, if I am not doing my inner work and somebody brings something really vulnerable and I get triggered and I start yammering or start trying to get them out of their feelings, I'm doing damage.
Yeah, yeah. Or I will say, and this is part of why I chose brain spotting over EMDR as a trauma treatment. You know, with EMDR, traditionally, now I have a lot of colleagues that have been trained in both, and so they've modified their EMDR approach with clients. But traditionally, with EMDR, the clinician leads the client through the process of resolution. And the biggest distinction between EMDR and brain spotting is in brain spotting, the clinician follows the client.
They're a step behind, which is
they're a step behind. And then that way the client goes where they need to go. And, you know, here's the other thing too. This is why, you know, when you're doing EMDR with somebody and the client begins to disassociate, you got to tap the brakes. You can't do it. And part of that, they begin to disassociate because in some cases they've been led to a place they're not ready to go.
That's right.
And so with brain spotting, here's the cool thing. Even with brain spotting, if a client goes and begins to disassociate, the cool thing is you're following them. They're not there by themselves. And
you don't know their story. Who do you think you are? Who do I think I am as a therapist that I know where they need to go? That's the tricky. That's the thing we teach at these experiential facilitator trainings more than anything else. Learning how to breathe and stay a step behind. You know, just to back up a little bit, the way I talk about being a supervisor or doing all these trainings, it's mostly trying to, like Camille, who is in school right now to learn all this stuff. I'm trying to untrain her. You know, learn all that stuff and then please let it go and bring your heart to the thing, right? Which is, you know, especially when we're dealing with populations that are vulnerable, and which is all the folks we're dealing with. But there's a couple of really vulnerable, you know, people with severe mental illness, which you've worked with a lot. I did in the past. I don't work with them that much these days. I work with a lot of people with addiction, and the families of these people are just, you know, life and death. It is like the end of the world, and people are dropping like flies out there right now. This is a huge, giant throbbing pain in our culture, and people will go for anything when please give me the solution, right? And I know I just hear as we kind of move toward the end, I want you to at least launch into. So Marie has been in both sides, the healing side, the treatment side, and the marketing side of this, and there's lots of overlapping conflicts there where, you know, you got to, as a marketing person, you got to meet your numbers or whatever. Believe me, I don't even want to know.
Yeah.
I haven't done much of that stuff, but Camille is a marketing person. So both of you know more about that than I do. So this reciprocity topic, I want you to at least launch into it for a couple of minutes.
I'll just give you just a kind of a thumbnails. You know, I wrote that piece quite a while ago. It was on my website, and then I had my website redone, and then it got lost, and I put it back up again. And what it is, reciprocity makes sense to me if, you know, you are selling cars, or, you know, you are selling air conditioners, or you're a plumber or something like this, or you have some kind of a service to offer somebody.
I'll do this for you if you do this for me. That's what you mean by reciprocity, right?
Exactly right. But reciprocity in the treatment industry is, in my opinion, it is so corrupt. Mm-hmm. Hey man, I'm short 2 admissions this month. Can you help me out? I mean, I have had people.
But my client doesn't have what you guys do.
Yeah. Yeah. My client needs something that you don't do.
Yeah.
But again, this notion of reciprocity is I think, and again, it's a systemic problem. Mm-hmm. I think the issue when you get venture capitalist money into treatment centers and you've got, investors who are looking at the bottom line and they're looking at heads in beds. They're not looking at the quality of the treatment. This is why we have the problem that we do. I think that, obviously, there was a big shakeup back in the 80s with managed care. I think we are on the threshold of having even more of a shakeup in the treatment world. I am amazed, there are some beautiful people that I love that are business development people. And I love these people. They're like dear friends of mine. And then there's others that I'm not dear friends with. And a lot of it is because of how they conduct themselves in business. Yeah. There is nothing that warms me up towards a friend and a colleague who represents a treatment center who will reach out to me and say, Marie, I just want to kind of give you a heads up. We're having some issues with X, Y, and Z within our program. So right now I'm going to ask you to hold off sending. And when we get, things cleaned up, wow, I will let you know. Now, see, to me, those are people I want to have a relationship with as a treatment consultant and as an interventionist, because, I was on the phone last week. I had a conference call with the new CEO of a treatment center, where I had an utter fustercluck happen with a client. And as a result of that, I'm like, hands off. And it was the new CEO, about a year and a half later after that event, reached out to me. We had a great conversation. And I told her, I said, look, as an interventionist, as a treatment consultant, I am an extension of what you do.
Yeah.
And so when I am telling a family, you're going to have this, not only your schedule, but these are the kinds of treatments that you can expect, that I know this clinician, and I know that this is the kind of work that you're going to be able to do while you're there. They are trained, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because as I tell families, when you go into treatment, you're working with a population that's not well. Okay. And excuse my language, I'm sure nobody's ever said shit happens, right, on this podcast of yours.
Be very nice here.
But the truth is, shit happens in treatment. Okay. And the thing is the CEO and I were discussing, and I've talked with many other CEOs, if shit happens, the family calls me on a Friday night at 9:00. I am not going to tell that family, you're going to have to wait until Monday morning until somebody comes into the office. Yeah. Because the way that I work with programs is, I'm going to be on the phone that Friday night with that CEO and talking to a clinical director on Sunday morning at 7:30, all of these things, which I have done, because again, shit happens in treatment, but being able to have that kind of rapport, right, with the clinical team, and you're an extension of what they're doing. And I also say this too, if I send somebody to treatment and they discharge and I had been working with them before, and the treatment center thinks that, that they need somebody different, a different clinician, I'm like, I'm cool with that. Yeah. And here's why. Most therapists are not, because most therapists operate from a scarcity model. I sent you that person. You got to send them back. Yeah. I sent you 3 people this month. You need to send me clients. And Marie is like, I operate out of abundance. Yeah. Somebody cancels an appointment with me. Thank you, God, I say. Maybe I can get some more paperwork done on my desk, right?
Yeah, and that's it's an advanced position. So what would you say? What would you say to either a clinician who's listening to this that's like, because I've been in different places, and I want to say I'm cured from all that, Marie, but I know that I've been in. You ever see the Popeye commercial, Popeye cartoons? You don't even know who Popeye is, Camille, but the Popeye.
I do.
But it's like he turns and he sees a person that he's going to have what he wants, and they turn into a ham bone. Suddenly my client looks like a ham bone to me. I don't know if you get the reference or not, but it's, some people, what would you say to a clinician who's mildly desperate right now and will cut corners? Or what would you say to a addiction treatment center business development person who's got the executive director breathing down their neck to get in, what would you say to those folks?
I would tell them the best thing that you could do is the next right thing. If you've got free time and you have called on everybody that you can call on and people still aren't sending, why don't you start doing some volunteer work for a local chapter of TAP? Or why don't you find a community behavioral health place where you could go and do some service work?
Yeah.
Why don't you go, get involved or start networking in a place that, maybe you have never even tried or even considered, like trying to get into, whether if you've got an adolescent program, reaching out to and providing some free things. Be creative, right? Don't.
Like a good sponsor, right, Camille? It's like, oh man, my life is a mess. Well, go find another alcoholic and help them out.
Service work. It's always the answer, right? Go help somebody else and get out of your own.
It is. And I'm going to say this, and I think I probably told you this years ago, Bob, and it hasn't changed. And people sometimes they want to call bullshit on me. And I'm like, dude, if I wouldn't be saying it if it wasn't true. I've been a therapist for over 12, 13 years, something like that. Every single week I get a new client. They may come in once and I never see them again. They may get booked on my calendar and then not show up.
Yeah.
But every single week, I went completely 100% virtual last March.
Yeah.
I have probably a third of my caseload now, fourth of my caseload now, are people I have never even been in a room with except through a computer.
Yeah. So between the two of us, we've got a lot of decades of experience. So people listening just have to do what we tell them. So here's what we're telling them. And here's what I've learned. Trying to make shit happen is not functional.
That is exactly right.
Allowing things to happen, which is much more difficult, is an abundance guarantee. and I have to practice that every day because I'm a control by nature. I think I'm supposed to control the stuff, and I have to do a regular mindfulness practice on a daily basis to let go and let this thing work itself out. It's been working out pretty good for several million years, actually.
It sure has. The other thing too, I would suggest to people, get a mentor, but know how to work a mentor relationship.
Yeah.
So if you see some, because I have clinicians literally from around the country that call me. It's like, how did you do that? How did you get this nice little boutique private practice right there in the middle of Highland Park? Technically University Park, but right there in the middle of Dallas. How did you get that and start that? And I walk them through. But a lot of what I did was service. A lot of what I did was just giving things away.
Yeah, it's all that karma, dharma, all that stuff you're always talking about. So you'd be a good mentor for anyone, Marie, and you've been a good mentor to me.
But Bob, let me say this. Know how to work a mentor relationship. A mentor relationship is not like we're calling that person every single week. It's like, okay, now what do I do? That's a babysitter. Okay, that's not a mentor.
Right.
I have a friend, she lives up in Chicago, and she told me one of the things that she does is she knows people who hire a personal board of directors.
Yeah. A
personal board of directors. And you convene these people, however frequently, once a month, once every 6 weeks. Granted, this was pre-COVID. And you get together and you have lunch and you walk through what your goals are and what your plan is and how to get there. You make sure you have a real diversified board of directors, right? So maybe you have people, because here's the cool thing about diversity, people from different industries will bring a different perspective, right? And so being able, and again, so this is that organizational leadership stuff that's coming out through that. But I mean, I'm so grateful we have new people, young people coming up wanting to be, that are passionate about recovery, passionate about helping people heal. And as long as, and I tell people, as long as you stay in a place and you are staying in a place of doing the right thing, and you're always doing the next right thing, doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean you're not going to have to work your butt off sometimes. Yeah. It doesn't mean that things are going to be lean. But I tell people, when times are lean, that's an opportunity God's given you to go do some work on yourself. What a concept, work on ourselves. Aren't we supposed to just look outside of ourselves and see the solution out there? Yeah. Bob, I used to say pre-COVID, I could stand in the at the very front of a movie theater, packed theater, and reach out, say to the group out there, say, okay, by a show of hands, how many of you out there think that you've got this thing called life all figured out? And the majority of those hands, I got it figured out. And I'm here to tell you, I don't even have it figured out yet. What I know about all of us, till the day that we leave this earth, we are all emerging adults. We all have growing edges. And so this idea of thinking that we've got it all figured out, that we're the smartest person in the room,
that's a good place to start ending right there. A good joke like that. I've got it all together. You know what I have together? I have less than 1% consciousness. That's what I have together.
Yeah.
And I might gain 0.0001 in this life. There is so much and that's one of the things those of us with advanced degrees find out. The more you learn, the absolutely, I know I don't know shit.
That's exactly right.
That's what I have found out.
Yeah.
And it's a little disappointing, but anyway. Marie, you are magical and fun and informative, man. That's some good stuff. We could, any one of those 79 topics that we've been on, we could have spent a day on. So anyway, thanks for bringing that beautiful stuff. Camille, thank you. Hey, Marie, why don't you let folks know how they can reach you and all that?
Sure. So my website's a great place to reach me, and it also gives you a good bit of information about me, and my website is my name. It's Marie Krebs, Krebs, consulting.com. You can I've got some other podcasts on there. I've got some blog stuff on there.
A very pretty website. It's worth going to just to see. It's very nice.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know what? The guy that designed it for me I think he's in the MKP program. I've never met the guy. It's a relationship that, virtual relationship.
The Mankind Project is a international, 100,000 men have been through that, trying to get down in our hearts, trying to offload all that stuff that we've been abusing the world with for thousands of years. We're healing that. MKP.
An excellent program, which I love, and I know that you were a big part of that for many, many years too. Yeah.
And now we do the Braveheart experience, which is similar to that, but we have a lot of the recovery stuff, Jungian stuff, and resolution stuff that we talked about involved out at the last report.
That's exciting. Yeah, just go to my website. You can find me by going to my website and reach out to me through that. And
say it again, Marie Krebs Consulting.
That's it.
Yeah.
Consulting, yeah. MarieKrebsConsulting.com.
Excellent. And this week, just in case you don't say it, Camille, there's if you are interested in that reciprocity topic, she wrote a dynamite blog post. It's going to be on this week. So watch for that later in the week after this podcast comes out. Okay, Camille, will you let folks know how to reach us one more time?
Yes. First, thank you, Marie. As a student who's currently trying to learn and navigate through this world, I feel like I just learned so much from you that I would never be able to get from a classroom. So thank you. I feel like any of my other student friends could learn a lot just from listening to you talk about everything, especially the ethics side and practicing out of your scope. But for Deep Waters, you can reach us by phone at 512-677-7847. You can also send us an email at admin, ADMIN, at Deep Waters Recovery. As Bob said, we've got the blogs that come out every Friday, and then the podcast will come out on Wednesday. And we're on all the social media channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and then keep an eye out for our upcoming Deep Waters Intensive weekends.
Yes, great. All right. So I don't know, this has been fun. Thank you, Marie. Thank you
for having me.
All right. Well, take care of yourselves. And next time, you've got to explain brain spotting, though, because I know there's people out there still. What is she talking about? All right. So more to come. All right.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everybody. You're in the deep waters now.